Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us for Financial Foundations. This is our budgeting class. For those that don't know me, my name is Elian Levatino. I'm a certified financial planner and partner here at Benchmark. And I am joined by Shannon Acosta, who is, I'm so thankful she's here. She's so much smarter than me and a much better teacher. And I think you're going to get a lot of what she has to offer also. She is also a certified financial planner and has taught this class multiple times. And she will have a lot to offer all of us. Some of us have asked, you've seen Financial Foundations as part of Benchmark, but you're not really sure what that is. So just zooming out a little bit, Financial Foundations is our financial freedoms course. And we look at this as an entire course, and you're attending the budgeting class. So we're going to encourage you to not only watch this video, but along with our others that we're going to be sending out throughout the year, that you can look at all of them together and look for the things that are of biggest interest to you, but hopefully you end up watching all of them and get a lot out of all of them. So again, thank you for joining us today for the budgeting class. As part of Financial Foundations, you may be wondering why we even created them. If you know anything about Benchmark, our mission is to encourage financial awareness and deliver the message of change, hope, and peace. The best way we could think to encourage financial awareness is to teach. We're big on teaching, and we love to just give away information for free. And that's why this is out here today. We just want you to have as much information as that we can make available so that you can start making some changes and just shifting behaviors a little bit, so that when we come alongside and help, that we'll help you with budgeting. We're helping you all the way along the journey of investments, all the way to financial freedom. So we hope you find the budgeting session helpful as part of the overall Financial Foundations. Today we're here to discuss the B word, the budgeting. This word triggers all kinds of emotions, and as much as we're here to teach, we want to dispel a lot of what could be negative connotation that comes along with budgeting. Budgeting should be simple, right? It's income minus expenses, and as long as you have a positive number at the end, you should be good. But anybody that's ever tried to stick to a budget knows that's not always the case, and it can be a little bit more complicated. So let's jump right into the logistics of budgeting and what we'll also bring up as the behavior of budgeting. So Shannon, can you start us off about why should we even budget at all?
Yes, and I want to address the word budget. Elian will talk in a little bit about how that word can come off as a little bit of restrictive, but let's go ahead and snip the strings of association between the word budget and somehow you're guilty of doing something wrong. Sometimes people think that if you're on a budget, it means that you're poor, or it means that you haven't done a good job managing your money, so you're on like a correction plan or something. A budget doesn't have to have a negative connotation any more than being on a diet doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to lose weight. This is just about your awareness. And I think it's important to shift our mindsets just a little bit and get away from it being like a yucky word or something that I'm too good for, or I'm embarrassed to have to engage with. So there are 5 big reasons why you should consider budgeting. And a lot of them are honestly emotional and about keeping control in your court rather than somewhere else. So the first is that budgeting reduces guilt and worry. A budget is a boundary. And think about how when you're a kid, your parents impose boundaries on you. You had rules, and we didn't like the consequences of breaking the rules, but study after study says kids need and crave the safety and security of boundaries. It provides them freedom to grow in their own ways. A budget is the same, except for none of us have parents that are going to stand there and tell us how we need to be spending our money. So we have to take the seat of being our own parents in a way. And when you implement boundaries and when you implement a budget target dollar amount for yourself, it reduces stress, guilt, and worry in the same way that kids feel safe playing within the rules that their parents have set out before them. That's very real. I can speak to that personally. This should come kind of as a surprise to nobody, but a budget will help keep you from overspending. About 55% of Americans, according to an AARP article from 2018, spend more money than they make. Short term, we all have months like that. But in the long run, that's a problem. So a budget will help keep you from doing that in a way that's going to eventually get you down a hole that'll be hard to dig your way out of. Budgets help you pursue your goals. Only 30% of Americans have long-term financial goals. And just like with anything you've ever done on a massive scale, you can't meet large goals without having tiny steps to chip away at each and every day. You can't build a house without a blueprint. You need a budget. You need to tell your money where it needs to go in order to meet your big long-term retirement financial goals. Because I promise you, nobody gets to retirement age and suddenly realizes that they've got $1 million in the bank waiting for them to retire. That never happens. It only gets there if you're intentional and you chip away at it little by little, and a budget helps you do that. Budget can help you eliminate the feast or famine mindset. You know, you get paid, there's plenty of money in the checking account, so you go out to a nice dinner with friends, but at the end of the month, you're eating ramen noodles because it's all gone. That yo-yo isn't always fun. So a budget will help keep things consistent and tell you what it is that you can afford to be doing reasonably. And finally, a budget puts you in control. You go to work, you earn your money, it's yours. You're in charge. Far too often, we look back and see where our money has gone without us being in control and telling it what to do. Sure, we might be the one swiping the card or paying the bill, but it's not intentional. And when you're not intentional with how you're spending your money, it robs you of control. And long term, that's not good for you, especially when it comes to something as powerful as money, as much as that can do for us. We had a really bad rainstorm lately, and I think that if you compared our house to our neighbor's house, it'll give you a good idea of what a house without a budget is like versus one with a budget. Our house doesn't have a good rain flow gutter system. Our neighbor's does. They've got all these dry creek beds and, you know, stuff I don't know what it's called, but it looks great. And when the rain came, it's not that they got a different amount than we did, but theirs knew how to flow and it didn't overwhelm their backyard. We had a lake. My husband had to move our cars. So apart from being something that we will be budgeting for upcoming, it taught me a lesson about how we're going to spend money one way or another. Go ahead and set the systems in place so that you can control where it's flowing. It's not going to overwhelm you if you do that way. So budgeting, again, has a negative connotation to it. Ellie, will you tell us a little bit about why a budget can be restricting and how can we reframe that?
Didn't I tell you she was a good teacher? That was fantastic. There's a couple stories in there I never heard before. And Shannon and I have done this class, I don't know, a couple hundred times. That was great. Thank you. Yeah, Shannon mentioned a lot of the highlights of restrictions and hassles and headaches and feelings that you get by creating a budget, but she also hit the nail on the head. This is about creating something that's going to help you find some control. Without that kind of control, you feel like you got money going here and money going here and money going here without really a plan for it. You find yourself swiping a card or writing checks, or I don't know if you even write checks anymore, but you find that your money is all over the place and you just don't have a healthy feeling of where everything is. We do it in other areas of our life though. I don't know about y'all, but I go to sleep later or earlier and earlier every night now. But I'm learning that about 10 o'clock, I'm done. And I do it with sleep patterns and eating patterns and family time. We make time for all those things. We're just encouraging you to make time and find a way to control your money. We prefer you look at a budget as a way that's going to create freedoms rather than restrictions. Creating freedoms means you're just putting a pen to paper, and we'll talk about next how you're going to budget, what your avenue will be. But this is really all about creating freedoms. If you're putting it on paper, you're making a line item for it. You can look at it and say, okay, our gas bill is going to be this, our mortgage is going to be this. We're going to pay for cable. We're going to budget fun. If you budget fun and you have a fun category right there that says we're going to have fun and this is how much money we're going to have fun with, you don't have to worry about am I spending too much because you've already planned for it. You can budget for a vacation, and you can be sitting on the beach without wondering how you're going to pay for it. There's some guilt-free things that come along with this, and there's freedom and confidence in knowing where your money is going. So back to what I was saying before, as you put a budget together, there are a ton of different ways to do it. We've met clients from all walks of life that do things differently. Shannon, how have you seen people use budgeting tools, whether it be online or something that's in front of them that's a little bit more tangible?
There are a bunch of different ways to create and maintain a budget. And yours is going to be different than your neighbors or from mine or for Elian's. So we encourage you to just find what works for you, own it, and really make it yours. And if any of these stress you out or add a layer of anxiety that wasn't there before we started talking, then just nix it, set it to the side, and try and find something else. The tool itself does not have to be complicated. An Excel spreadsheet works. I use that. We have a Google Drive situation where, I update it every month. You can use a pen and a paper. There's something about getting out a pen and writing it down and tracking expenses that really works for a lot of people. That would never work for me because my purse is a bottomless pit and I can't keep up with the same piece of paper for that long. You can use any number of apps that are available. Some are free, some come with a subscription cost. Every dollar was issued by the Ramsey Institute, and it falls really closely in line with his baby step philosophy. So if you are really big into that philosophy, then check that out. Mint.com is another one, and one that's recently become popular, at least in my circle of clients, is YNAB, You Need a Budget. You can also use a digital envelope system. You've heard of the cash envelopes before, and that's where you determine, we're going to spend $400 on groceries this month. You get $400 in cash and you put it in an envelope. That's a tool. For a lot of folks, especially in a modern era, cash isn't realistic. It's not in my household. We have actually several checking accounts. Excuse me, I should have been more prepared for this. We have a bank with about 10 different checking accounts. Don't judge me just yet. And I carry around physically about 5 or 6 of them and write, that says entertainment on it. So this card is specifically for us to have fun. And instead of keeping up with my entertainment expenses, as long as it's coming from that card, it's within bounds. And if you're a bad guy watching this, please don't steal my card information. Hopefully I did a good job covering it up, but I'll just.
We can edit that out later if we have to.
Yeah. So depending on the tool that you're using, now you have to figure out actually what your budget's going to be. So Elian, walk us through that.
How do you build a budget? Where do you even start? Well, the easiest part is the income. You know what you're making. So the first thing to do is just look at your bank account, check your direct deposit slips, or however you're receiving your paychecks. Include side jobs. Don't forget your side hustles. If you get a bonus once a year or once a quarter, and don't forget alimony, child support, and Social Security should you be receiving any of those. If you're married, combine your incomes. We think that after years and years and decades of experience of doing this, we find it incredibly important that you work together as a team. So if you're married, if you have a significant other or partner, whatever your situation is, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we find it incredibly important to put all those things together. Now, the expenses are where it gets a little bit more confusing. We found that one of the easiest ways to do this is just go back through your transactions, whether it be at your bank or a credit card statement or something like that. Look at the last 90 days. When you write all those things out, what it will eventually capture is things that are recurring on a month to month that you won't forget about, and maybe some things that are paid out quarterly. Don't forget about the things that are semi-annual or annual. One of the things I always think of is my termite contract. That comes up once a year, and it's always in April. And I have a different line item for that always comes out in April. Please do this out of curiosity and not judgment. When you're doing this, you can tend to look back on some expenses and start kicking yourself. Please don't do that. This is a judgment-free zone. We want you just to be aware. We're encouraging financial awareness. Be aware of what's going on. No judgment, just facts. So after you've done that export and you've looked at everything on a line by line item, you can start trying to categorize it. Some of it's going to be difficult. The easy one's going to be the electric bill, because that's one category. It's electric. The mortgage is going to be easy. That's one category for mortgage. But Amazon can creep up on you. Target can creep up on you, because I don't know about y'all, but if we get something at Amazon, sometimes it's a toiletry, and sometimes it's slime for one of the kids, and sometimes it's something fun for me. Without really knowing if it's a miscellaneous expense or is it part of what you would call day-to-day living for toiletries or something like that. Be very careful when you're looking at those, and maybe even go back through your Amazon and Target purchases and split out what those things were and recategorize them. So just be really careful of what would be considered groceries, what would be considered toiletries, and what could be considered clothing. Once you got that lump sum, take it and divide it by 3, and that's going to be your monthly average. What are you spending on a monthly basis as an average? But as you start getting down to the nitty gritty of what you're doing, I think you're going to find that number adjusting a little bit. Not every month is going to be the same, and we're going to encourage you, at least for the first 6 months to a year, to budget every month. Every January could be different. Every February could be different. I know in January sometimes, or in December, depending on when you bought your house, it could be property taxes are due. Again, termite contracts are in April. You have some things that are going to be in different times of the year. So every month is going to be different. Please write them out month to month. I think you're going to find that to be incredibly helpful. You'll find your expenses are different month to month. You'll be able to save things in different patterns, whether it be in 3-month increments or 6-month increments. You'll find a lot of freedom inside of there also. Budget to zero. And what we mean by that is put together all your income, put together all of your expenses. At the bottom, if there's something left over, if you have a positive number, go put it somewhere else, whether it be in savings, putting it in giving, putting it in investing, wherever you are in the baby steps. And those of you that know us, we're big on the baby steps. As part of budgeting, we want every dollar to have a name. You want to know where your money is going instead of wondering where it went. The biggest thing is to be incredibly intentional about every dollar. So any dollar that comes through, if you have any surplus, needs to be readjusted and put in one of those categories so that your bottom line number is 0. What happens in the unfortunate event that you've started your budget and you have a negative number at the bottom? This doesn't mean you have $0 in your bank account. It just means that we need to readjust some things. So if you look at this and you decide, hey, I may have an income problem, or I may have an expense problem, or do you have both? Do you have an income and an expense problem? But before you can move forward, that deficit has to be corrected so that you have what's called a zero-based budget. Be careful not to consider any money as left over. Again, give it all a name and a job. But the question is, usually when it comes to this, is what is too much in any one category? If I have money left over, what category should it be going to? There's no firm boundaries of what categories needs to have what, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a breakdown so that you just kind of have in the back of your mind as you're doing your budget what some would consider reasonable as far as parameters for each individual category. So consider giving at 10%, savings, investing, emergency fund, wherever you are in the baby steps at 10%, food at 10 to 15% of your household income, utilities at 5 to 10% of your household income, housing, which would include principal, interest, taxes, insurance, for a mortgage or rent or whatever else you're using, should be considered at 25%. Transportation, which would be auto for just your car payment if you have one, and gas, consider transportation at 10% of your monthly income. Health at 5 to 10%. That could be health insurance, that could be doctor's visits, that could be prescriptions at the pharmacy, that kind of thing. Insurance at 10 to 25%. And the reason that's got such a big range is it just depends what kind of insurance you're carrying. Consider medical, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, life insurance, all those things inside of that category. Recreation, this is the part we're talking about, budgeting fund, 5 to 10%, having that in there, having an entertainment budget. And miscellaneous at another 5 to 10%. I think you'll find some months you get a haircut, others you don't. Some months you get an oil change, others you don't. Consider having a miscellaneous category to capture those types of things. So let's take a closer look at housing. That's always the one that trips people up. Do I have too much house, or am I spending too much on my rent? The average American's budget shows that 37% of their take-home pay is going to housing expenses. We look at that as a little high. We found that anything over 25% can create a pinch that limits your options to pay down debt and invest and have fun and save and do all the things you want to do. So our only words of caution as you start is to look really closely at your housing expenses as a percentage of your household income, and look at it very closely to make sure it's, in that 25% category. Study yourself. Just ask questions about your budget once it's in place. Which areas of my current budget are within the recommended guidelines? Which are outside? How much of my expenses are essential? Is everything essential? Is everything a need? Or do you have some things that are wants that you might be able to carve out? Which ones are non-essential? Do I need to consider increasing any of the categories in the future? Do I need to consider some of them maybe even falling off that you won't need next year? What categories do you need to decrease? What categories do you want to increase, and which ones do you want to decrease? You have control of this. When you put your budget together, once all is said and done and you've written out your categories, you have the ultimate say and control of all these dollars that are coming in and going out. That's the whole purpose of doing this. Again, not to create restrictions, but to create freedoms. That was a lot. Rewind that, go watch it again if you need to. That was a ton of information that I squeezed into about a 5-minute talk. But there's all kinds of things that come along with this. What if we have irregular income? What if we have irregular expenses? What if? And we'll try to hit a couple of those now. Shannon, will you hit the irregular income part for us?
Yes, I will. And I want to acknowledge the questions that you asked at the very end of that last section. Brilliant. And a little bit of self-reflection goes a long way. I appreciate you mentioning that. All right, if you do not have irregular income, you can refill your drink or take a nap for about 5 minutes. This is for people who have inconsistent income, whether you're self-employed or whether you are commissioned, or maybe you are heavily involved in the gig economy. This is hard because you can't consistently bank on earning the same every month. So in order to create an irregular income-based budget, we have to start by looking backwards. Take a look at what your worst month was in the prior year. And we're not pessimists over here. We don't want to assume that that's all you're going to make every month the whole entire year. But if you set your expectations low enough, then that's the key to happiness, in my opinion. But I'm kind of kidding about that. But if you can kind of set your base and know that at least you can cover this handful of essentials, even if you don't outperform your worst month from the year prior, then that can really help with some anxiety of knowing whether or not you can count on making it. So number all of your expenses in priority order. If you can only afford one thing in a given month, what would the priority be? And for most of us, it's going to be your homes, rent. Another very second runner-up would be food, things that provide safety and for basic needs: food, transportation, clothing, home, and utilities. Literally write them out, number them 1 through whatever. Once number 1 is taken care of, as your income starts to trickle in, then cross it off the list and go to number 2. If your income covers the first 8 expenses, you need to stop there until more income arrives for the month, or you need to pause until the next month if that's as far as your income's gotten you. Once more income starts to arrive, you pick up where you left off. If your spouse has consistent income, if you're doing this as a team, then that helps provide a little bit of extra cushion and stability to move down the list, guaranteed. We're not telling you that, you have to only pay your mortgage this month and you're not allowed to eat. But the idea of going through this exercise is to get you to think about what's most important to you so that you can shift your mindset in drier months. You know, maybe right now all we're doing is eating in this month. You know, we're going to a grocery store and we're not going to go out to eat. Going out to eat is number 15 on my priority list. Food from the grocery store is number 2. It helps you identify before you get stressed or emotional what's important to you and how to direct your dollars. And if you find yourself routinely dipping into your emergency savings, because that's something you have to consider. If you have your regular income, you might have months where you can't quite cover it all. And that's what your emergency fund is for, to fill those gaps. Always make sure to go back and replenish your emergency fund, you know, after you do that. But if you find yourself routinely doing that, then maybe you need to think about having a supersized emergency fund, something like a float account that will help stretch you through months that are a little bit tighter than others. With irregular expenses, if you have tuned out, it's time to tune back in. Now we're going to talk about another irregular expenses. Wait, did I already say that? Did I say irregular expenses? All right.
Maybe, I don't know.
We've talked about irregular income. If that did not apply to you, it's time to focus. We're going to talk about irregular expenses at this point, and Ellian will help walk us through that.
Yes, I'm a nerd, and I find this one of the most intriguing parts of this thing. We enjoy teaching, but I also find some fun in this. There's fun in planning all this out. And I talked to somebody just the other day. He was so excited when his I think it was his property insurance came due. There were times in previous years where his property insurance came due, and he's trying to figure out what credit card to put it on, or how to go get more work that month to be able to pay his property taxes. Maybe it was insurance, one or the other, I can't remember. But he was so thrilled when it came around that he had the cash for it, and he followed these steps. And I do things similarly to Shannon, but not that far. I can't keep up with 10 accounts. I see the benefit. I understand it. Yours is going to be different from mine. Mine's different from Shannon's, but mine does overlap Shannon's in a way that I have an account for irregular expenses. And every month, if I know an expense is coming up, I am taking 1/12 of it. I'm dividing it by 12. And every month I'm setting aside cash to cover that expense so that when it comes due, all I do is I write a check out of that account and it's done. And there's so much freedom in that, so much freedom in that. If you're a little bit behind and that bill is coming up in 6 months and you know that, well, divide it by, what would that be? Divide it by 6 instead. If it's a $100 bill that's coming due in a few months, divide it by 6. Start saving for that now. So once you've paid it, after you've paid it, again, this is an opportunity to go back to your budget 6 months from now, take that same thing and you get to divide it by 12 this time. And that way you can save for it on a month-to-month basis rather than trying to expedite it over a 6-month basis. Again, this creates an incredible amount of freedom so that when these bills come up, you don't have to feel yourself being surprised by it. Or even if you are surprised, if you're not surprised about it, the anxiety of knowing that it's coming and the concern and wondering what you're going to do. Again, just being intentional is going to be one of the biggest encouragements that we can have for you. And I'll stop right here and say, when we talk about encouragements, if you need encouragement, please let us be your cheerleader. If you don't have enough cheerleaders around you, we want to cheer you on. We celebrate when people become debt-free. We celebrate when they find success and they're winning with their money. We love taking that journey with people. It's hard along the way, but we love the celebration on the back end of it. It encourages us. It helps us see the fruits of the labor and just gives us an opportunity to develop further relationship with you because we were able to take that journey with you. So please take us up on that. We would love to be your cheerleaders. Next, even after you put all this together, sometimes the budget just doesn't feel like it's working out. Shannon, can you give us some tools on what to do when we're feeling like maybe we're a little defeated or just don't understand why we're not making ends meet?
Yes, this topic is very near and dear to my heart because I've been here so often. Anytime you go through a life change, whether it's having kids or getting married or shifting jobs or moving into a new home, you might experience this. And that's why it's so important to me, because I have every time I've gone through one of those transitions I just mentioned to you. When you try on a new budget, it's just like trying on a new pair of shoes. You have to give it time to see if it really fits and works out for you. So the number one piece of advice I would give you is to be patient. If you're frustrated and you've been doing this for 1 month, give yourself permission to be frustrated and give yourself permission to make tweaks. I'm a runner. I'm one of those crazy people that feels calm and relaxed when I run 10 miles. I know it's really weird, but there is a shoe store in town that will let you try shoes for, 30 days or something, and then return them. No questions asked if it's not the right fit for you. I love you, Breakaway. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not, but you have saved my knees. So whenever I start feeling pains and twinges after getting a new pair of shoes, I don't make an appointment with the podiatrist. I go back to Breakaway and say, do we need to change what type of shoe I'm running in? When you do that with your budget, you're going to save yourself the mental trauma of assuming that there's a problem when there might not be one. Just go back and put your detective hat on, like Elian said earlier. Just be curious. You might have missed your Amazon Prime subscription or a vet bill that you didn't know was coming up. It's okay. So be patient and go back and track your expenses. The best budget on the planet is only as good as it is when you stick to it. So if you find yourself your budget's not working, maybe it's because you haven't been tracking things as diligently as it was designed for you to. When you keep up with your spending, your budget will keep up with your life. And I can't say enough how true that is. If you do a little every day, it's not overwhelming. Can't expect every month to be the same. And if you're really getting tripped up in one or two categories, consider cashing them out and going back to the old school envelope system. Maybe it's temporary, but it'll help you identify where some of those behaviors can kind of be short-circuited if it's really an issue. And this is after you've gone through the patience of tweaking and adjusting and seeing if you just have missed an expense here or there. Make sure your budget's realistic. And this is hard. Every now and then we need to adjust our expectations of what we can do. And that's really difficult, especially in an era with social media and comparison culture running rampant. It's possible that you're in a season that is, you need to be spending below the means that you think you'd want to be. And that's okay. We've all been there. If you're really having trouble, work with a coach. We have financial coaches on deck here who are excited to work with you and go line by line through your credit card statements and bank statements. They've got highlighters, they've got sticky notes, they've got high fives. They'll work with you to hit and kind of break through snags that you're experiencing. And after you've done all of that, after you've gotten budgeting help, if you're still hitting a snag, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, maybe there's a different problem. In all of this, in our money and our budgeting, it's so interconnected and woven in with our emotions, with our histories, with our families, with our pasts. I am not a therapist and I don't want to pretend to be qualified to give advice like this, but if you continue to have hiccups in your budgeting, maybe you need to talk to somebody and see if there's a deeper issue at hand. I've done it. I know Elian's done it. And I've seen it work time and time again when it just seems like there's no other option. What are we doing wrong? So, if for 99 of you who are watching this, you're rolling your eyes and going, that's dumb. As long as there's one person who might be listening that speaks to, I'm okay with it. Give that a consideration. Elian, we're wrapping up here. How can I get my spouse on board if maybe they're not as excited about budgeting as I am?
Before I jump to that, I want to piggyback off of something you said, because you hit the ball out of the park. I want to take it a step further. We're talking about trying to stay inside of parameters, but also creating freedoms. And you said you're a runner. And by the way, I'm one of those people that think you're nuts. And running 10 miles, I think I would probably just pass out at like the first half mile. There's no way I would get through the first one. But like when you miss days, doesn't your body tell you, hey, you've missed too many days and you have to get back to running?
Yes. Or my body tells me, when I've started running after I've missed a few days.
Okay, so like there's still some physical training that comes along with that, and you feel that sometimes you miss the mark and you got to jump back on the horse. I look at budgeting the same way. It's okay. Look, I have a wife and 2 children. There are nights that Kelly and I look at each other and say, there's no way either one of us are cooking tonight. We know it's on the board, or we know we already had a plan. Everything's in the refrigerator. Neither one of us have the mental energy to do it. And I am not above ordering a pizza. And I am not above running to McDonald's real quick so I don't have to get in the kitchen and cook for 45 minutes. It's okay. If you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad couple days, please give yourself some freedom and some grace to have a couple bad days, but jump back on. After that's passed, when everything's calmed down a little bit, jump back on. This isn't permission to jump off completely. It's permission to have a couple bad days and not kick yourself for it. I don't know. I thought that would be a good thing to talk about, because you're not going to be able to figure out this budget to perfection in the first 30 days. Matter of fact, they say it takes 3 to 4 months to really nail it. And even after that, it takes even longer to make sure that you're sticking to it. So give yourself a little grace and some freedom in that. I mentioned Kelly and how do you bring your spouse on board? Thankfully, my spouse was always on board, but sometimes it's not always like that. So whoever your accountability partner is, if it is a spouse, partner, whatever it is, please consider bringing them on board with you. It's so much easier with 2 people. And if you don't have the accountability partner, please let us know. We would love to help you and be your coach and accountability partner. But when it comes to approaching your significant other about being on board, if you already know they're going to be confrontational about it, and instead of walking in and telling them, hey, this is what we absolutely have to do, this is what Ellie and Shannon said, this is the only way we're going to get this turned around, instead come to the conversation more inquisitive. Be careful. Just watch what you say. Stay away from absolutes like you always or you never or things like that. Inquisitive means, asking for their opinion, listening more than you speak, just trying to figure out where they're coming from. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you've already had a trigger and it's already in the back of your mind, and now it's in the forefront of your mind. I really want to get this under control. How do I bring my spouse along? Your spouse hasn't had that epiphany yet, or maybe they have, and you're watching this together. And if you're watching this together, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. If your spouse is not yet on board, please come to the table with just trying to understand where they're coming from. And it might not be a hard sell. They might already be ready to go and jump on board. If it's a harder sell, please just be inquisitive. Your timing is going to matter. Don't go to them when you're already upset. Don't go to them when they're upset. Don't interrupt them if they're watching TV or something like that. But maybe set aside some time for the 2 of you to talk. And again, always staying away from absolutes like never and always. Don't have the conversations when you're paying bills. I can remember my mother at the kitchen table trying to balance a checkbook after my father had done stuff with it. And she's throwing stuff all over the place because he never dropped balances. He never wrote down he wrote down that he wrote a check, but he didn't write down how much he wrote the check for. And back in the day, they used to send your checks back to you in an envelope after they'd been cashed and canceled. So she's flipping through all the checks to make sure that she's accounted for all of them. That can be a pretty stressful time to start talking to somebody about budgeting. Setting aside some time outside of when you're already paying bills and maybe where you're a little too upset about it already. Don't start the conversation about budgeting. Just start it about dreams and goals and where do we want our lives to go together. Going ahead and having some vision planning and forecasting what you want your life to look like, and then backing back into the conversation of budgeting as a way to reach those goals. Another way to do it is while you're being inquisitive and while you're talking about budgeting, just volunteer where your weaknesses are with money. Already have those ready to go. And I promise you, we all have weaknesses with money. And to Shannon's point earlier, yes, I've asked for budgeting help before. Matter of fact, I've asked Shannon for it. That's how she knows that I've asked for it before. We're financial advisors, but we have our own financial advisors also. We're way too involved emotionally in our own stuff. And even every financial advisor here leans on the others. for compartmentalization and just a different viewpoint, because we're so in the middle of our own situation. If you can walk to the table and owning your own weaknesses, it's more likely the other person will at least volunteer that they have some weaknesses also, and then you can figure out how to get on the same page and move forward together. But the biggest thing is to celebrate your differences. It's okay that one person really wants to get deep into the weeds of the money and the other one doesn't. If you're the one that doesn't, you still have to come to the table. And if you're watching this video with your spouse and you're the one that doesn't really want to get in the weeds and you've made it all the way through this video, I'm so proud of you. You still owe the other person 5 minutes a month. There needs to be a budget meeting. Everybody needs to be on the same page and together. You don't have to be the one that does the line by line item. That can be the other one. You don't have to be the one that's tracking everything and keeping up with all the expenses, but you do have to be a participant. So the spenders and the savers are going to balance each other out. The analytical and the more free spirit, they're going to balance each other out. You're going to need each other. Celebrate those differences. That's eventually what's going to make you a really good team, especially when it comes to budgeting. I might have spilled the beans a little bit, but Shannon, how often do we need to be reviewing the budget?
Every month. And it doesn't have to be a really labor-intensive process. So don't let that scare you. Once you have the right tool in place, once you find the right shoes, it's just something you need to come back and revisit with your partner or spouse or somebody else who you're accountable to check in and make sure that nothing's awry. Usually we do this a day or two before the new month. With Hunter, my husband, this looks like a beverage, a relaxing beverage of our choice, usually popcorn. I love to make popcorn on the stove with lots of salt and butter. And our little ritual is to have a money date night where we spend 15 minutes going over it. And then we do something fun afterward, like watch an episode of The Office or a funny movie or play a game. We try and make it to where we're not just, business, but the more you get into a groove and a routine with it, the easier it becomes, I promise. Every month is different though, so just be paying attention to birthdays, anniversaries, sport club dues, school enrollment fees, you name it. In January, it's Elliot's birthday, so I had to make sure that we had a line item in there for Elliot's birthday. It's going to start getting warmer soon. When it is warm weather out, maybe we'll budget for an extra zoo trip or botanic gardens or something like that so we can enjoy the outdoors. So pay attention seasonally to where you are and adapt your budget that way. Guess what? We're done. We have gone through the most frequently asked budgeting questions that we get. And if you're still sticking with us, then congratulations. Elian, will you wrap us up, please, and recap everything?
Yeah, I got a couple quick takeaways, and I'm sure you do too. One of them, just study yourself, know yourself, be honest with yourself, understand what makes you tick, and build your budget around that. Consider hiring yourself. If you needed to hire somebody to do your budget for you, would you hire yourself? Making sure that you have full control of everything. You probably wouldn't be hiring yourself if you had a bunch of negatives in the budget and didn't do anything about it. Consider making yourself accountable not only to your own behaviors, but to your significant other or to someone else as an accountability partner. Budgeting, again, is not about restrictions. It's about making your money stretch further. It's like a raise. We're trying to give you a raise and creating some freedoms inside of what could be considered a restriction. Identifying your pain points. Why isn't budgeting working for you? Is your budget realistic? Are you actively engaged with your budget? Are you setting healthy boundaries for yourself? You can't fix it if you don't know what's wrong. We're going to encourage you to be very honest with yourself and ask yourself those questions as you go along. Shane, do you have any others that we need to touch on?
I would encourage you to identify one thing from the 45 minutes that we've been talking. There's a lot that we threw at you. And there's nobody watching this where everything we said is going to enhance your life. You've got to pick through and weed out what's going to make it better for you. You have to be able to discern, will this be an enhancement or a detraction from my overall peace and well-being? And notice I didn't say, will this make my life easier or harder? Sometimes the harder thing will ultimately end up being an enhancement for you. But we've talked about why should you budget? is a budget going to be restricting? We've gone over budgeting tips and tools. We've gone over irregular expenses, irregular income. We've talked about troubleshooting and maintenance, and we'll send you recap notes of all of this, but think about one thing that you will seriously consider becoming an enhancement to your life if you adapt your behaviors. And let us know if we can do anything to help you. We're here to cheer you on. We've got high fives for days, and we've been there. So let us know if us or one of our financial coaches can help you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.